Scott, I'm here with Emily, who was just on the other side of the courthouse where state police and some family members came out and made some comments. And she joins us now with, first of all, what state police said, and then let's talk about the family.
Yeah, state police saying at this point they're not going to make any comment because Judge Gall has not lifted the gag order on this case. They said that they will be making statements next month after sentencing, but for right now, they don't have anything to say because that gag order is still in place.
And then Richard Allen's wife came out.
Richard Allen's wife, Kathy Allen, came out. She was crying and she just said to the media, this isn't over at all. That was her one indication. And then we had a close family friend of, I believe, Libby German coming out, and she was talking about pushing for legislation to prohibit crime scene photos from being released online behind some kind of paywall, from being able to pay to see graphic crime scene photos. And as you know, it was in the past week that we had seen someone somehow had leaked photos of the girls at the crime scene, and just terrible photos. And so the families want to work on some kind of law to prohibit this from happening, because that just added to the tragedy of this, I think, for them to see their children out there in the public forum like that, and to think that someone was paying to see such a gruesome scene. They want something done about it so that no other families have to go through that. So
yes, certainly very vulnerable pictures, and just only adding to the pain that the families have had to experience and endure. Any sense from police, did a sense of state police feeling vindicated, or were they very stoic?
Stoic. They did not say. I mean, a spokesperson came out and said, this is going to be real short. We don't have much to say. Judge Gall has not lifted the gag order, but we're going to be happy to comment. We'll put something together next month after sentencing. And that was it.
So Bob and I were continuing to talk about what his observations were in the courtroom, and you were able to walk around the courthouse and get a little bit of a sense of what the scene is right now. What were you able to observe?
Well, interesting, as I was going over to that gathering over there, a woman was holding up a sign that said, the only crime here is the crime from police and the prosecution and, the state. So, so there are some people that think that this was the wrong decision, and they're vocal about that and holding up their signs. But I would say the majority of folks here very pleased.
Yes, Samantha Johnson is also here, and she's been talking and getting some community reaction and joins us now. Sam, what have you been able to learn from the people that you've talked to?
Well, Anne Marie, I am currently at the location Emily was just at a few moments ago. We've heard from several community members. We heard from state police, as Emily mentioned too. I want to tell you too, so many of the people who are here waiting for this verdict have been here for weeks. So many of them have been camped out day and night to be one of the first to hear the verdict. We talked to a woman, her name is Sarah. She lives here in Delphi. She says she's a family friend of the girls, and she told us today is the day, right? That phrase, we've continued to hear that for years now. And we talked to her just a moment ago. She said she could have almost bust with excitement because she said today is finally the day. Take a listen. You said, I've been praying.
I have been praying. I said, as you know, we usually had 4 or 5 of us, just a few signs to show respect to the girls and what this community has went through for the past 7.5 years. Today is a new day. Today is that day. The day they can start healing. Today's that day that those families can start the healing process. This part is done. So as a community, now they get to heal all together. This community and the surrounding communities and counties surrounded them. Also, big shout out to law enforcement. They came from everywhere around Indiana. You couldn't tell what department, but they were so cohesive together. They blended well. You didn't see the division in the rank or anything. They protected this county, and now this county needs to heal.
Now, as we know, there are obviously two sides to this case. And like Emily mentioned a second ago, we saw Richard Allen's family walk right through these doors, one of them hand in hand with defense attorney Brad Rosie, Andrew Baldwin, Jennifer Auger, also walking out with Richard Allen's family. His mom crying, his wife Kathy crying. And then as she passed us, she said, this isn't over at all. Of course, much more to come here in Delphi. Anne Marie and Emily, we're going to stay on this side. We expect that more people may be coming out of the courthouse still. We'll check in with you in just a few minutes.
Sam, thanks so much. We're rejoined here by Bob Siegel, who just had a conversation with Indiana State Police Superintendent Doug Carter. What did you learn from that conversation?
Well, again, there's still a gag order, so there's nothing official. There's nothing on the record. Probably the most that I can say as far as his reaction today is the reaction that he showed in the courtroom. Just out here on the steps right now, he was walking with his wife, and when I said, "Mr. Superintendent, how are you?" He just took a big, deep breath. Could tell, he's taken this case very personally and been very personally involved over the last 7.5 years. In the courtroom, he and his wife, their hands were clutched. I saw when the verdict was read, he squeezed her hand a little bit tighter. She squeezed his hand back. A few moments later, he put his head down in his hands and he started crying. After the verdict, he reached back and he squeezed the hand of Becky Patty, Libby's grandmother. He went up, gave hugs to the prosecutors and the entire prosecution team. There's been countless hours put in by state police and the investigators who, not just over the last 2 years since the arrest, but obviously for the 5.5 years even before that, from the day that these girls' bodies were found, that have been working tirelessly on this case. So for Indiana State Police and the investigators who've worked on this case, obviously, I don't know if victory is the correct word today because nothing is going to bring back Abby and Libby, but as far as justice, this was the verdict they were looking for, and these were the words that they hoped Judge Gall would read after the jury came back this afternoon.
It was such a heinous crime. These girls were just in the 8th grade, and this heinous crime in this very rural, seemingly safe environment, right. that they went missing and then that they had been so brutally murdered. That's why this has gotten so much attention, not only in this state, in this country, but around the world. People following this case.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it so many times before. Before this happened, this was that quaint little bedroom community where people really slept with their doors open, and they talked about that to us in those early days after the girls' bodies were discovered. And after that, things really changed. And when you would come here years later to do different follow-up stories before there had been a break in the case or an arrest, if you talked to the young people that had gone to school with Abby and Libby, they would tell you how their lives had changed, that their parents were less willing to just kind of let them go for a walk in the woods. And I was just kind of looking at the day today and the blue sky and the temperature, and I remember it being like that on February 13th. February 14th, the next day, very different. It was dark, it was freezing. When you're talking about Doug Carter and his involvement, I remember him coming in on the state police helicopter and getting out to give the press conference and talk about that. It landed in a field right across from the Mears entrance where the girls had got dropped off that day. And so, when every time there was an update and a press conference, you would see Doug Carter come out and address, the media and the public when they released that second sketch. Him, saying, "I remember," and this made everyone's the hair on their arms stand up when he looked in the camera and said, "We believe you might be in this room hiding in plain sight. We believe you are in this community hiding in plain sight. You might even be in this room." And I remember that day, everyone kind of looked around at each other. So to hear Doug Carter, to hear his reaction in that courtroom, that tracks.
And I think